When I am giving you actual data and showing you what that data means, you can't turn around and try to find ways to poke hole in that data if you don't have any data and you simply are relying on anecdotes. Let's get back to crime, though. Last week, Target announced that it was closing 9 stores due to theft, generating an avalanche of credulous coverage from nearly every major media outlet. One thing was missing from all these stories: data. So Popular Information tracked it down. These were all the Target. These were all of the articles. Target says it will close 9 stores in major cities, citing violence and theft. Target to close stores in San Francisco and other cities, citing theft. Target to close 9 New York City West Coast stores to stop losses from rising theft. Now, when you look at all of these places, you realize that these are, one, heavily urbanized areas. They are dense, and therefore, real estate is very expensive, okay? Now, could that be a major reason as to why they're closing stores in certain areas? Could it be oversaturation, considering that there is usually a Target and across from a Walgreens, across from a CVS in the same exact fucking neighborhood, which, of course, ironically, originally used to be local shop owners that were priced out of the marketplace in said neighborhoods, for the record. Something to consider, something to remember. These used to be areas where there was a local shop owner, a small business owner that engaged in commerce that everybody else in the neighborhood knew, and then big budget retailers came in and completely priced them out of the marketplace and took over, and they squeezed as many profits as they possibly could, only to close up shop. If you recall, this happened in Appalachia with the Walmart that we saw that Peter Santinello talked to some of the residents about. Walmart does this all the time in the South. Target does it, and Walgreens and Target and CVS do it in heavily high-density areas, which happen to usually be blue cities. So Target is closing the store at 517 East 117th Street in Harlem. But according to NYPD data, there were fewer incidents of shoplifting this year at the Harlem store than other nearby stores that will remain open. So that's number one. Target is also closing its location on Folsom Street in San Francisco. But according to SFPD, San Francisco Department of Police data, there were fewer incidents of shoplifting in and around that store than other nearby stores that will remain open. Okay? The Seattle Times did a similar analysis of stores in the Seattle area and found that there were fewer police incidents in and around the 2 stores being closed than other nearby stores that will remain open. Okay? All of this data suggests that there were other reasons beyond shoplifting driving Target's decision to close stores. In June, Target CEO said it was saddled with lots of unwanted merchandise that it was forced to deeply discount, cutting profits. So, are there other factors at play here? Absolutely. Meanwhile, Dollar General is opening like 5 new locations within a 10-mile radius wherever you are. The reality is that people are becoming poorer, okay? They're becoming poorer. They do not have enough money to afford the same kinds of groceries that they were previously purchasing. Of course, there are other reasons, but the police data are only reported cases. Yes, that's a really good perspective to have. Except you have to understand, by design, if you are working at Target in an effort to ensure that you get your insurance payout, every single time there is theft, you have to report to the police. They won't do their jobs, but that doesn't change the reality that these police reports are valid. The notion that police are not doing any kind of real enforcement when theft is happening is an entirely separate subject. If you are working at this retail store, you still have to report it to the police. So those police numbers are accurate. Do you understand? The idea that no one reports crimes to the police is, first of all, a silly idea. You are just facing data. You're staring down the barrel of the gun of data, and you're going, well, this doesn't correspond to my implicit biases, my personal biases, so there has to be some other secret third thing that is causing this information to not match what I believe is happening. So normally, you're supposed to re-examine that, okay? Normally, you're supposed to re-examine that. What you're supposed to do is exercise critical thinking. This is a muscle that all of you have. Some of you don't use it. Some of you just want me to fucking spoon feed you data. This also exists in the left as well as the right. Okay? So, the thing you have to understand is police reports, okay, does not mean arrests. Police reports have to happen if you are at Target, if you are at CVS and you are the clerk or the manager of the store. You have to report the theft, because if you don't report that theft, how the fuck is Target Corporate going to write that off as a part of its shrink? Okay? They have to. There are insurance payouts for shrink. Do you think that the entire multi-billion-dollar insurance industry does not demand adequate police reports for every single instance of crime that has occurred in any particular target? Of course not. That is precisely the reason why those police reports cannot be hand-waved away, and you cannot claim that these guys are simply not calling up the cops and at least filing a report specifically for insurance purposes. That does not mean that cops go in and stop people from stealing, baby formula or whatever the fuck. But those numbers are not incorrect. They cannot be incorrect. Understand? Now, depending on their accounting setup, you can compute shrink based off of what is/not sold in inventory, perpetual inventory system. My friend, I am not talking about computing shrink. You are misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not talking about computing shrink. I'm talking specifically about insurance payouts. In order for insurance payouts to happen, what does the insurance company want to do? You've all experienced this in your healthcare. You've all experienced this in traffic accidents. Your insurance provider does not want to pay everything, all of the costs when you get into a traffic accident. So when you do get into a traffic accident, in order to file a claim, you need a claim number. In order to be able to do that, you have to talk to the police and file a report. Okay? Do you get it? Because insurance companies have a vested interest in not making these payments to you. That is their entire job. That is how they make profit. Okay? Insurance is not the main variable here. There's a multitude of accounting reasons for not reporting it all. My point was internal shoplifting numbers are probably higher for a multitude of reasons. Of course, police are involved for a majority. What? Internal numbers could be higher was my point. No, internal shrink and external shrink is factored in. Obviously, we talked about it. Internal shrink is 26%. External shrink, at least this past year, was 36%. Anyway. Also, if there was systemic underreporting of crimes, which does not exist, and I think I did a decent enough job to explain to you why it does not exist by giving you the vested interest that insurance companies have in giving the lowest amount of payouts for shrink as possible. If there was systemic underreporting, it would exist everywhere in that same region. This data looks at the same region. So it would literally have to exist all around that same region, and yet these stores, in comparison to other stores in that same exact area, even if there was underreporting happening, it would happen for all, show that there is less theft happening in those stores that are closing down than their neighbors. Do you understand? If you don't know much about Target's LPA and reporting or much about Target in general, just listen. Used to work at Target, and they absolutely report every little thing. Their LPA is super hawkish. Oh, you're not talking to me. You're talking to chatters, because it's very clear you don't know what you're saying. Or are you talking about me, or are you talking about the chatters? Because I'm saying they are hawkish on loss prevention and report everything, because I didn't have to work at Target to comprehend this, because I know that they have to get insurance payouts. Loss prevention at Target when I was there is very hawkish, yeah. Dude, they have undercover officers, dude. What are we talking about? Target literally, it's so funny because sometimes we'll watch a video from Target and like you got some conservative pedophile being like, oh, children are being homified here at Target. And then like some fucking jack dude will come over and he's in plain clothes and you're like, what the fuck's going on? And immediately you recognize like, oh no, that's an undercover loss prevention officer. Okay. There's also one other part that I must mention in this process, which is I have the data, right? You don't. If we're having a conversation about this and you have like a very passionate position, when I am giving you actual data and showing you what that data means, you can't turn around and try to find ways to poke hole in that data, okay, if you don't have any data and you simply are relying on anecdotes, okay? This is very important for people to understand, because if you're that passionate about something, you should have at least done the work to figure out what is fucking going on. That's why it's always this, okay? Target in San Francisco slammed by 10 thefts a day, employees say. Like, it's literally this. It's this all the time. It's just simply an anecdote. We look at Target's internal information, their loss prevention structure, what the material reasons for insurance payouts are the way that they are, and how they're stringent about like ensuring that all of that report, all of the crime, or at least all the theft that's happening in particular stores are actually reported. We look at comparative numbers to all the other stores in the area that haven't closed down, and yet people still go, well, what about this one store that got hit 10 times? They're not reporting it. They're not reporting it. They're not reporting it. There's 10 thefts a day. They're not reporting it. They are reporting it. They have to report it. Okay? Reporting it and people not being arrested for it are two entirely different things. The real reasons why stores close down is not theft. Okay? It's not. It's profit. It's profit margins. Theft, in the way that it happens, while it's not great, okay, is not the significant reason for stores closing. The major reason for why stores close is their profit margins are too slim. Now, are you going to tell me that theft is slimming the profit margins? Absolutely not. Okay? Theft is not capable of slimming the and narrowing the profit margins in comparison to other factors in consideration, like the price of real estate, commercial real estate, like other additional profit extraction mechanisms being placed in targets, or an oversaturated marketplace with like 11 different fucking options of the same exact thing. This is precisely the reason why Target is blaming shoplifting for closing the Harlem store, but opening 5 additional stores. Okay? Part of the reason why Target and Walgreens, despite the fact that they openly admit in their financial reporting, or even to the media later down the line, maybe a year later down the line after they've engaged in that kind of layoffs, mass layoffs, or store closures, the reason why they say crime is the reason why we're closing is because they want to massage the narrative. If they were to say, we are unprofitable in this region and that's why we're closing the stores, that requires further examination. They do not want their stocks to plummet. So they use, oftentimes, a very racialized, propagandized talking point that the mainstream media comfortably creates for them, because they also have a material interest in defending the interests of capital and also, creating a more robust and more violent police force. Part of the reason for why everybody wants that, at least on the capital ownership side, is because they too recognize the contradictions. They too see what you see and feel. Things are getting a little bit worse year over year. There are too many stressors with ultimately zero solutions. We keep literally doing the same things over and over again, even if it doesn't work. And it's not just draconian measures as a deterrence measure to stop crime from happening, which, like I said in the beginning of this conversation, is demonstrably a failure in the United States of America, where we have the highest prisoner per capita population, where we house or shackle 25% of the entire planet's prisoner population, despite making up only 4% of the entire planet's overall population. The land of the free, they say. Anyway. Why would a self-identified progressive in media literacy believe this propaganda? Just a hypothetical person, no one specific. the impact of seeing something like that and the real fears that you experience, the absolute shattering of your own idea of personal security going away in a moment's notice is very powerful, chatter. Not everyone is going to be like, these are my principles, okay? Principles go out the window. That's why they always say, you know, even every atheist is on its fucking knees praying to God in their final moment, okay? There is no principled stance in that moment. You fucking see someone break into your car, or you have children and you see the machete-wielding homeless lady and you fucking lose your mind. You don't think about that. Yeah, ain't no atheist in a foxhole. Exactly. You see that and you go, that's fucked up. Someone needs to fix that. What's going on? And if there's enough of the propaganda machine telling you that the real reason for this is because crime is out of control and, you know, gay DAs are stopping you from enforcing these crimes and the cops are telling you on the ground that that is exactly what's going on, then yeah, why wouldn't you believe that? I pray to science. What do you mean? Yeah. All the atheists in a foxhole are praying and saying, oh, my science, I hope I don't die. Yes. That's why if you want to know what these companies are doing wrong, the best thing to do is look to the market coverage, okay? Because they, by law, can't completely lie to their shareholders, okay? That is not something they can do. They can lie to the media and say, oh, it's because of crime. But when they're revealing information to their shareholders, they have to reveal the actual truth. They can lie to the public. They can't lie to their shareholders, which is why they end up revealing a much different reality. And people who engage in this kind of analysis will openly reveal that reality to you. In the same breath that they say crime is on the rise, and that's the reason why they're fucking closing these stores too. Amazon is dominating e-commerce. Amazon is part of the reason. Same-day delivery, Amazon purchasing grocery stores has absolutely become a major player that is destroying these retail chains, okay? They originally did this thing to local shops, and now they're experiencing the same thing that they did by Amazon, a larger player, which is kind of hilarious. This is also known as consolidation of corporate power. Okay? Yes, the ironic death spiral of capitalism. The big fish eats the little fish. You might have a locally owned grocery store operated by someone in the neighborhood. You no longer can operate in that neighborhood when Target comes and says, well, we're going to sell everything for much cheaper than you because we are a national brand. Now you're priced out. Everyone's going to the Target instead of your store. A couple of years down the line, because real estate is always going up, you no longer have a business. You are forced to close your business. Maybe it becomes significantly better for you to just sell the commercial real estate instead. All of a sudden, the only grocery stores that are providing the neighborhood with commerce and food is Target and CVS. But then there's an even larger fish in the pond. That fish is called Amazon. They come in and they say, oh, guess what, dude? You don't even need to go to a grocery store anymore. We bought Whole Foods. We have Amazon Fresh, which also operates outside of Whole Foods. We bought Bristol Farms. We are now going to use our fleet and our delivery system to completely eviscerate brick and mortar grocery stores in general. Okay? We are going to destroy your pharmacies. Now, the big guy in the room has killed the other big guys in the room. Think about that. How is Amazon a monopoly legally? It is not. It is not a legal monopoly. There is no such circumstance. Technically, it does not abide by the law. But the law, or what is legal and what is illegal, is more so a matter of who is motivated enough to go up against a giant like Amazon. Now, however, Lena Khan over at the FTC is actually doing something about it. There is currently an active, ongoing antitrust lawsuit that was launched against Amazon only a week ago. So, maybe there is some hope. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Might be surprised, but I was under the impression that Target was growing because they're opening 3 new locations in my area. I work directly in a lot of the stuff that lawsuit addresses. It's unfortunately hitting a lot of the wrong points. Doubt it gets anywhere. All right. I hope you guys understand that. I hope that was a little bit better of an explanation. Okay? It was really upsetting for you to calmly explain all of that only to get shut down with literal hysteria. Yes. There's not really much you can do about that, though, is there? All we have at the end of the day are our convictions. Okay? All you have. And in a lot of instances, it does not matter if you are on the side of truth. It does not matter if you are on the side of justice. What matters is people's perception of you. Okay? That's it. And if there is a prevailing narrative, sometimes it doesn't matter if you are truthful and honest. Anecdotes are powerful. So are logical fallacies, for the record. That's why people do them. So, is the theoretical job of policing, I'm not talking about policing in practice, I'm talking about the theoretical job of policing. Is it a difficult one? Absolutely. Okay? It is a very difficult job to do enforcement of the law. Is it entirely their fault that they're bad? No, it is completely outside of their control in many instances. I will say that as well, because their job is to enforce the law. If the law is unjustifiable and unjust, and in many instances it truly is unjust, then yes, they are going to do unjust law enforcement. Okay? Loitering, jaywalking. Jaywalking is a great example of this. Literally created specifically to basically criminalize being a pedestrian and forcing us to live and exist inside of a car-reliant infrastructure. The idea that it's like illegal to cross the fucking street and it's technically your fault if you get hit by a car is insane. And yet it is very sane, and it happens, and it's literally here. We live in that planet. If you enforce that law, you are participating in enforcing an unjustifiable law. Same with loitering, as a matter of fact, or anti-homelessness measures, anti-poor measures, evicting a fucking mother out of a house, evicting a pregnant mother out of a house that she is squatting in is, in normal circumstances, if you just remove the context of capitalism and private property ownership and parasitic landlording, you all of a sudden go, what the fuck? That's an insane thing to do. That's crazy. Why would you ever do that? That's wild. You should arrest the fucking guy who's literally, removing the supply of housing, a necessary resource for survival, from the market. That's what we should be doing in a just system. But of course, we don't think about that because we all exist under a capitalist dogma. But I'm pointing to that because I want to tug at your heartstrings, because everybody understands usually that, removing a pregnant mom from a home is an unjustifiable act of violence, but cops are supposed to do that. Even if they don't want to do it, that's their job. This is why people say ACAB, all cops are bad. It's not that they are bad people, even though some of them certainly are. They are bad when they are wearing the badge, because when they're wearing the badge, they are supposed to do bad things because that's what their job is supposed to be. So that's policing in practice. Policing in theory, on the other hand, is supposed to protect and serve the interests of the public. That is why I say there is a need for a system of enforcement and a way to make sure that we do have regular laws. What the fuck are you talking about? Jaywalking? It's so you don't walk into the street and get hit by a car? Think about that. I promise you're going to understand. Please think about it. Jaywalking is not the same as seatbelt laws. The right-of-way should always be given to pedestrians. That is the reality, but unfortunately, we, especially in our car-reliant infrastructure, we do not do that. We need 4 roads. You just can't. We need 4 roads. You can't just walk into a street. No, I'm not saying I'm anti-road, okay? Also, jaywalking does not occur on the highway system. Nobody's jaywalking over the highway. We're talking intersections inside of cities where there are literal fucking laws that are supposed to ensure the safety of pedestrians in general. Once you actually criminalize, here, let's dive into it. Let's dive into the history of jaywalking so that people understand the forgotten history of how automakers invented the crime of jaywalking. 100 years ago, if you were a pedestrian, crossing the street was simple. You walked across it. Today, if there's traffic in the area and you want to follow the law, you need to find a crosswalk, and if there's a traffic light, you need to wait for it to change the green. Fail to do so, and you're committing a crime. Jaywalking. In some cities, Los Angeles, for instance, police ticket tens of thousands of pedestrians annually for jaywalking with fines up to $250. To most people, this seems part of the basic nature of roads, because once something is completely legalized, then you understand that is expected, right? You're like, what the fuck? Of course it's going to be that way. To most people, however, this seems part of the basic nature of roads, like we said, but it's actually the result of an aggressive, forgotten 1920s campaign by auto groups and manufacturers that redefined who owned the city's streets. This, in and of itself, comes across like a totally reasonable, preventative safety measure, a mechanism created by local governments in an effort to ensure that citizens can cohabitate public spaces alongside cars at a time when cars were becoming ever more popular, right? However, the reality is that this is a sea change, an attitude shift, where now the cities in the 1920s, their roads were supposed to belong to the cars rather than the people. This is precisely the reason why when you hear, and I'll tie this back to cops in a second right now, actually, when you hear a cop actually fucking kill a pedestrian, like that one guy who is a serial mass murderer of civilians in, what was it? Idaho? Fort Wayne? He always gets away with it. 1, because he's a fucking cop, and 2, because civilians do not have the right of way. Pedestrians do not have the right of way. That is a deliberate mechanism. Or is it Indiana? Yeah. That is by design. This is how we wrote those laws. In the early days of the automobile, it was the driver's job to avoid you, not your job to avoid them, Peter Norton says, a historian at University of Virginia and the author of Fighting Traffic, The Dawn of the Motor Age in the American City. But under the new model, streets became a place for cars, and as a pedestrian, it's your fault if you get hit. One of the keys to this shift was the creation of the crime jaywalking. It's strange to imagine now, but prior to the 1920s, cities' streets looked dramatically different than they do today. They were considered to be a public place for pedestrians, pushcart vendors, horse-drawn vehicles, streetcars, and children at play. Pedestrians were walking in the streets anywhere they wanted, whether they wanted, usually without looking, or whenever they wanted, usually without looking. Norton says during the 1910s, there were few crosswalks painted on the street, and they were generally ignored by pedestrians. As cars began to spread widely through the 1920s, the consequence of this was predictable: death. Over the first few decades of the century, the number of people killed by cars skyrocketed. Those killed were mostly pedestrians, not drivers, and they were disproportionately the elderly and children who had previously free rein to play in the streets. The public response to these deaths, by and large, was outrage. Automobiles were often seen as frivolous playthings, akin to the way we think of yachts today. They were often called pleasure cars, and on the streets, they were considered violent intruders. Now, if you were to say, Hasan, what is your suggestion? To destroy cars? To no longer allow vehicles? The internal combustion engine and vehicles and its mass availability has been a major boon in American industrial production, American commerce existing. To that I say, yes, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. I'm not saying fuck cars. I'm not one of those fuck car urbanists, okay? I'm not. However, in order to strike a delicate balance between pedestrian and car, in order to develop less car-reliant infrastructure, we must move away from the mentality that cars are an absolute necessity, an absolute must, and that they are always in the right and pedestrians are always in the wrong. Okay? You're a different kind of fuck cars. Yeah. Cities erected prominent memorials for children killed in traffic accidents, and newspapers cover traffic deaths in detail, usually blaming drivers. They also publish cartoons demonizing cars, often associating them with the Grim Reaper. However, anti-car activists sought to slow down the deaths. In 1920, Illustrated World wrote, every car should be equipped with a device that could hold the speed down to whatever number of miles stipulated for the city in which its owner lived. The turning point came in 1923, says Norton, when 42,000 Cincinnati residents signed a petition for a ballot initiative that would require all cars to have a governor limiting them to 25 miles per hour. Local auto dealers were terrified and sprang into action, sending letters to every car owner in the city, taking out advertisements against the measure. Do not help build a Chinese wall around Cincinnati. Let's make it unanimous and vote no, which I personally love. Because they're doing fuck China sentiment even back then. It's fucking dope. Okay? The measure failed. It also galvanized auto groups nationwide, showing them that if they weren't proactive, the potential for automobile sales could be minimized. In response, automakers, dealers, and enthusiast groups worked to legally redefine the street so that pedestrians rather than cars would be restricted. So, Kansas City passed the first ordinance requiring them to cross streets at crosswalks, but in the mid-20s, auto groups took the campaign with vigor, passing laws all over the country. Most notably, auto industry groups took control of a series of meetings convened by Herbert Hoover, the Secretary of Commerce at the time, to create a model traffic law that could be used by cities across the country. Due to their influence, the product of those meetings, the 1928 Model Municipal Traffic Ordinance, was largely based off traffic law in Los Angeles, which has enacted strict pedestrian controls in 1925. Los Angeles did not only suffer from being the leader in the field for jaywalking laws, criminalizing walking on the street, which, you know, in prior formations was the norm, but also the evisceration of alternative modes of transport like the trams that they used to utilize in California, Los Angeles. So there's that as well. So, yes. You look to the roads, if you no longer see streetcar tracks on the roads, that is because they have been paved over. Yeah, the strategy also explains the name was given on crossing foot illegally on foot. Jaywalking during this era, jay meant something like rube or hick, a person from the sticks who didn't know how to behave in a city. So pro-auto groups promoted the use of word jaywalker as someone who didn't know how to walk in a city, threatening public safety. At first, the term was seen as offensive, even shocking. Pedestrians fired back, calling dangerous driving jay driving. But jaywalking caught on and eventually became one word. It almost feels like if you are on the side of Capitol, you can collectively organize to utilize the state and its enforcement mechanisms to your advantage, and then ultimately create laws that end up inevitably becoming so norm that you cannot imagine a world outside of it. If only that is how capitalist dogma has operated. If only there was some way to analyze the situation, you know? If only. Anyway, Eighth Ross Tempest. Thank you for the 10 gifted subs. And for those who say this is a terrible take, the deaths directly correlate to increasing speeds and popularity of cars. This history of it is secondary. This is a terrible take. No sane person wants to drive on a road where someone can walk in front of you at any time. Azan. So you think it should be legal to walk into traffic on legal roads? I think cars inside a city should be severely restricted. I think cars should be severely restricted in general. I think that public transit should be the primary mode of transportation. This would literally open up the roads for more commerce. It would make it easier for people to get to places. It would genuinely take a major cost off of people's daily existence. There should be severe restrictions, especially inside of cities. I'm not alone in this. Jaywalking as a law does not exist in many European countries, and some of those European countries, including Spain, for example, or even Amsterdam, have created entire city blocks where no cars are allowed. This has been a good thing. This has been positive, okay? When you can use more areas of the city, including the streets, okay, commerce thrives. It doesn't actually change the freedom of transportation or the freedom of travel. It simply makes things better. It's also better for reducing carbon emissions. I also think that having public transit as the primary mechanism for transport inside of cities would be good for mixed income collaboration. I think that it would make it better. All of a sudden, even the wealthy people living inside of cities have the same exact interest in fixing public transit. You know, that sort of thing. But of course, I cannot even envision a future like that. But yeah, that's the brief history of jaywalking. Of course, we have laws for high-speed roads, but we are allowed to make the assessment if it's safe to cross ourselves. Anyway, the small aspect too would make our city government pay more attention to its people. Yes, any kind of socialization initiative actually forces the government's hand to operate in a way that cares more about the entire population, not just the select few that are their corporate benefactors. This is one of the additional benefits of having socialized medicine. Countries with socialized medicine cannot have rampant corruption in their food safety measures and allow whatever kind of shit that people are eating to continue being served, because they have a vested interest in ensuring, they have a vested interest in lowering the cost of healthcare in general. This yields more pro-people policies as well. All of this is, of course, linked to one another, all the way from cars and jaywalking to more walkable cities that actually make your lives better, make you healthier, and everything else, really. We got here from climate change. We got here from talking about policing, but of course, under capitalism, everything is linked to one another. It's just a different, we should just start talking about a different way to exist. That would be nice. Getting back to, oh yeah, jaywalking is now decriminalized in California as of this year. Thank you, Fango Lives. But how could you make this argument to people that believe that 15-minute cities are actually a burden and a major conspiracy? At this point, it seems like capital owners do not even need to push people in a certain direction or to try and manipulate them. We do enough of that to ourselves for $0, as a matter of fact. We do it all the time.